The crystalline chambers of Concordia Prime hummed with frequencies that made Ambassador Elena Vasquez's molars ache, though she maintained her diplomatic smile, as 47 different species debated her fate in languages that ranged from subsonic growls to electromagnetic pulses. The massive orbital station stretched beyond visual comprehension, its bioluminescent corridors pulsing like the arteries of some cosmic organism, while gravity fields shifted and flowed according to the physiological needs of its diverse inhabitants. Elena adjusted her collar nervously, a gesture that sent ripples of what could charitably be called amusement through the assembled council members. To her left, Colonel Sarah Mitchell, introduced to the council as her administrative aide, fumbled with a steaming cup of what passed for coffee in this corner of the galaxy, managing to splash several drops onto a holographic treaty display that immediately began flickering with indignant protest codes. "My sincere apologies," Sarah stammered, her voice carrying just the right note of mortification as she dabbed at the projector with a handkerchief that somehow made the situation worse. "I'm still getting used to the artificial gravity fluctuations." The hegemon, a being composed entirely of living crystal whose faceted form towered 3 meters above the assembly floor, resonated with harmonic patterns that the translation matrix rendered as gentle laughter. "Such enthusiasm for our customs," the ancient entity observed, each word accompanied by prismatic light displays that danced across the chamber walls. "Though perhaps your species might benefit from basic motor coordination training before attempting interstellar diplomacy." Elena's smile widened, though something sharp flickered behind her eyes for just a moment. "We humans have always been believers in learning through experience, Your Eminence. Sometimes our methods appear unconventional." From the methane-breathing section of the chamber, Ambassador Zexhai of the Nebula Confederation bubbled what might have been agreement or indigestion. The translation protocols struggled with species that communicated through controlled gas emissions. The massive jellyfish-like being floated in its environmental suit, bioluminescent patches along its translucent body, pulsing in patterns that suggested mild interest mixed with digestive satisfaction. "Unconventional," repeated Councillor Vexthal, the representative of the Dominion Syndicate, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with mechanical precision as he shifted position. The beetle-like warrior's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights in a kaleidoscope of calculated menace. An interesting diplomatic term for primitive. Lyrale, serving as the session's mediator, felt her long ears twitch with suppressed irritation. The elegant points that marked her as one of the Aetherni caught the shifting light as she leaned forward, her voice carrying the musical quality her people were renowned for throughout the galaxy. "The purpose of this gathering is to evaluate humanity's petition for council membership, not to debate their developmental stage." "Evaluation implies there's something worth evaluating," Vexthal clicked, his translator rendering his chittering into standard Galactic with mechanical precision. "These, humans, still employ kinetic weapons, projectile systems that rely on crude chemical propulsion. Their fastest vessels barely achieve 7% of light speed without gravitational assist from stellar bodies." Elena nodded earnestly, as if accepting a compliment. "We've always been fond of the classics. There's something satisfying about the fundamentals, don't you think? Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Sarah chose that moment to accidentally activate her personal communication device, which immediately began playing what sounded suspiciously like an ancient Earth polka. The tinny music filled the vast chamber, causing several species to emit sounds of confusion or distress. She slapped at the device frantically, managing to silence it after a sequence of increasingly embarrassing musical snippets. "Technical difficulties," Elena explained smoothly, though Lyrale noticed she didn't seem particularly embarrassed by her aide's continued mishaps. "We're still adapting our equipment for council standard frequencies." The ethereal representative, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering force field, spoke through harmonic resonance that bypassed the translation systems entirely, communicating in pure mathematical concepts. The assembly's collective translation matrices rendered its thoughts as query, purpose of evaluation when conclusion predetermined, observation, amusement value significant but insufficient for membership consideration. Now that seems a bit harsh, Alina said, her tone remaining conversational despite addressing a being whose very existence challenged conventional physics. We might surprise you. Humans have a talent for exceeding expectations, usually in directions no one anticipates. Lyrale found herself studying the human ambassador more carefully. There was something about Alina's responses that didn't quite align with the nervous incompetence her behavior suggested. The woman's eyes moved constantly, cataloging details, measuring reactions, filing away information with the systematic precision of a tactical computer. When she smiled, which she did frequently, the expression never quite reached those calculating dark eyes. The pacification protocols exist for sound reasons, the hegemarch intoned, his crystalline form shifting colors to emphasize the gravity of his words. Younger species require guidance, structure, limitations that prevent them from damaging themselves or others through inexperience. Limitations, Alina repeated thoughtfully as if tasting the word, such as Counselor Thistle of the Aquatic Collective, a being resembling a 6-meter-long cuttlefish with cybernetic implants grafted along its tentacles, rippled through the water-filled section of the chamber. The translation came through as carefully modulated as diplomatic speech could manage. Standard restrictions include military vessel limitations, territorial boundaries, technology transfer protocols, and resource extraction quotas. Alina said, nodding as if these restrictions were perfectly reasonable. And these help maintain galactic peace. For over 3,000 standard years, Vexthel declared with chitinous pride. The Council maintained stability through proven methods. Sarah managed to knock over her coffee cup entirely, the contents spreading across the floor in a pattern that somehow managed to spell out what looked suspiciously like tactical coordinates when viewed from above. She apologized profusely while attempting to clean up the mess, her movements creating an even more elaborate pattern. That the pacification protocols arrived in Alina's quarters via quantum courier, materializing in a shower of silver particles that reformed into a crystalline data core roughly the size of a human fist. Sarah watched the process with fascination, poking at the residual energy wisps that drifted around the device like luminescent smoke. "Fancy delivery system," she commented, accidentally triggering the core's activation sequence when her finger passed through what appeared to be empty air. The device immediately projected a three-dimensional legal document that filled most of the room with floating text in 17 different languages. "Oh, brilliant. I've gone and activated lawyer vision." Alina laughed despite herself, navigating through the holographic clauses with practiced ease. "At least it's not singing this time. Remember the trade agreement from the Zephyrian Collective?" "How could I forget? 3 hours of mathematical poetry about tariff regulations," Sarah groaned, attempting to wave away a particularly verbose subsection that kept following her around the room like an eager puppy. "I still have nightmares about ambic customs procedures." The protocols themselves proved to be exactly what Alina had expected, a comprehensive framework for keeping humanity safely contained within predetermined boundaries. Military vessel restrictions limited them to defensive craft no larger than a frigate. Territorial boundaries confined human expansion to their home system and 3 adjacent sectors. Technology transfer protocols essentially prohibited them from developing anything more advanced than basic interstellar communication without council oversight. "They're being generous," Alina observed, scrolling through the resource extraction quotas. "We're allowed to mine asteroids, provided we don't exceed 17% efficiency ratings, and submit environmental impact reports in triplicate. Sarah had given up trying to dismiss the hovering legal text and was now playing a game where she attempted to read the ethereal version, which manifested as shifting geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. What's this bit about cultural integration assessments? Are they planning to send us to Galactic finishing school? Mandatory sensitivity training, Alina read from another section. All human diplomats must complete a minimum 400-hour course in interspecies etiquette before engaging in formal negotiations. 400 hours of learning not to accidentally insult someone by breathing wrong, Sarah mused, finally managing to collapse the projection by what appeared to be sheer luck. Though I suppose after that incident with the molten core delegate and the ice sculpture, Alina's communicator chimed with an incoming transmission from Lyreley. The Etherny mediator's image appeared above the device. Her elongated ears slightly drooped in what Alina had learned indicated either exhaustion or mild frustration. Ambassador Vasquez, I hope I'm not interrupting, Lyreley began, her musical voice carrying undertones of uncertainty. I wanted to discuss some aspects of the protocols before your response is due. Of course, Alina replied, noting how Lyreley's eyes seemed to linger on Sarah, who was now attempting to clean coffee stains out of her uniform with a sonic scrubber that was clearly designed for metallic surfaces. We're always happy to receive guidance. The Council is eager to proceed, Lyreley continued, her diplomatic training evident in how carefully she chose her words. Councillor Vexthal has been particularly vocal about humanity's potential as what he terms productive junior partners. Sarah snorted, the sonic scrubber producing a sound like an asthmatic wail as it failed to interact properly with fabric fibers. Productive junior partners, that's almost insulting enough to be creative. Lyreley's ears twitched upward slightly. Alina had learned this indicated either amusement or surprise. Colonel Mitchell, your assessment of the counselor's terminology is refreshingly direct. Sarah has a gift for cutting through diplomatic niceties, Alina said smoothly. It's one of her most endearing qualities, though it does occasionally result in minor interstellar incidents. Minor? Sarah protested, finally giving up on the scrubber and tossing it aside where it continued making distressed mechanical noises. That thing with the quantum collective was completely their fault. How was I supposed to know their ambassador was actually a sentient equation? It looked like a holographic display malfunction. Lyreley's expression suggested she was trying very hard not to smile. The incident report mentioned something about attempting to fix Ambassador Prime by adjusting its mathematical constants. In my defense, it was clearly suffering from some kind of dimensional instability, Sarah said with wounded dignity. The poor thing was oscillating between theoretical and practical existence. I was trying to help. Alina decided to steer the conversation back toward safer territory. Lyreley, you mentioned the Council's eagerness to proceed. Should we interpret that as enthusiasm for human integration? The mediator's ears flattened slightly, indicating what Alina had learned was diplomatic discomfort. The Council views humanity as an interesting addition to galactic society. Your species displays characteristics that many find novel. Novel, Alina repeated thoughtfully, such as. Lyreley seemed to choose her next words very carefully. Your approach to problem-solving appears to operate on principles that don't always align with established patterns. Most species follow predictable negotiation strategies, logical decision trees, mathematical optimization models. Humans seem to embrace variables that others would consider chaotic. Sarah had found a different cleaning device and was now attempting to repair the damage she'd done earlier, producing a series of small explosions that filled the room with the scent of ozone and burnt synthetic fibers. Chaotic is just another word for creative, she said cheerfully, ducking as sparks flew from her latest attempt at technological integration. We prefer to think of it as strategic flexibility. Strategic flexibility, Lyreley repeated, watching Sarah with growing fascination. Is that why Colonel Mitchell's equipment failures always seem to occur at precisely the moments when sensitive information is being discussed? Alina felt something cold settle in her stomach, though her expression remained perfectly composed. Sarah has always had interesting timing. It's one of those quirks you learn to work around. Like yesterday, when her communication device activated during Counselor Thistle's discussion of fleet positioning protocols. Lyreley continued, her voice still musical but carrying undertones Alina couldn't quite identify. Or when her coffee spill occurred just as the Zephyrian delegate was outlining their defensive grid specifications. Sarah looked up from her latest mechanical disaster, her face a picture of innocent confusion. Are you suggesting my clumsiness is somehow strategic? That's giving me far too much credit. I once got lost in my own quarters for 6 hours because I couldn't figure out how the door worked. That was different, Alina said quickly. The door controls were labeled in quantum collective notation. Even the maintenance staff had trouble with those. Lyreley's ears were now standing at full alert, a position Alina had never seen before. Ambassador, may I ask you something directly? Of course. What exactly do humans want from council membership? Alina considered the question, aware that her answer would likely determine how the rest of their conversation proceeded. We want to be part of something larger than ourselves, to contribute to galactic civilization, to learn from species with centuries more experience than we have. And the pacification protocols that are undoubtedly necessary for a species as young as humanity, Alina replied, her tone suggesting complete sincerity. We recognize our limitations. Sarah chose that moment to achieve what appeared to be a minor breakthrough with her cleaning efforts, producing a small cheer of triumph that was immediately followed by every piece of electronic equipment in the room powering down simultaneously. The sudden silence was profound. Did I do that? Sarah asked into the darkness. Emergency lighting activated, bathing the room in red illumination that made everyone look vaguely sinister. The distress signal reached the Dominion Syndicate patrol fleet at 3:47 Standard Galactic Time, broadcasting on emergency frequencies in what could charitably be described as mangled galactic standard. Captain Zector of the cruiser Mandible's Edge clicked his compound eyes in irritation as the transmission crackled through his bridge speakers. This is human cargo vessel Lucky Strike, came the static-laden voice. We are experiencing, what do you call it? Catastrophic atmospheric compromise in Sector 77 Alpha. Request immediate assistance before we all become, how you say, vacuum-dried. Lieutenant Vashka, Zector's tactical officer, Mandible clicked what passed for laughter among their species. Vacuum-dried. These mammals have the strangest expressions. Standard rescue protocol, Zector ordered, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the bridge's bioluminescent displays. Deploy boarding pods. If they're leaking atmosphere, we'll need environmental suits and medical support. The Lucky Strike appeared on their sensors exactly where the distress call indicated. A battered-looking vessel that seemed to be held together by optimism and improvised repairs. Atmospheric gases vented from multiple hull breaches in lazy spirals, and the ship's power signature flickered like a dying candle. Poor creatures, observed Chief Medical Officer Thechnal, her healing mandibles already secreting the enzyme preparations used for treating atmospheric exposure. Humans are so fragile. No natural exoskeleton, no redundant respiratory systems, no ability to survive vacuum exposure even briefly. The boarding operation proceeded with textbook efficiency. 3 assault pods latched onto the human vessel's hull, cutting through what appeared to be hastily welded emergency patches. The syndicate boarding party encountered no resistance, quite the opposite, actually. They were greeted by a human crew that seemed almost comically grateful for rescue. "Oh, thank the cosmic forces!" exclaimed the apparent captain, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and what looked like improvised breathing apparatus strapped over her mouth. "We've been trying to patch the hull breaches for 6 hours, but our repair systems keep malfunctioning." "Fear not, primitive mammal," Zector announced through his translator, his tone carrying the benevolent condescension typical of his species when dealing with inferior life forms. "The Dominion Syndicate does not abandon vessels in distress, regardless of their technological limitations." "You're too kind," the human captain wheezed, apparently struggling with the atmospheric recyclers. "I'm Captain Morrison. We were transporting medical supplies to the outer colonies when our navigation computer decided to take what you might call an unscheduled vacation." Lieutenant Vashka conducted a tactical scan of the vessel, while the medical team attended to the apparently oxygen-deprived crew. "Standard human configuration," she reported to Zector privately. "Primitive fusion drive, basic defensive screens, cargo holds filled with what appears to be pharmaceutical supplies." "Any weapons signatures?" "Negative, sir. If they have armaments, they're either powered down or extremely well concealed." Zector nodded approvingly. Humans, in his experience, were about as militarily sophisticated as the average asteroid. Their inclusion in galactic society was viewed by most syndicate officers as an amusing curiosity rather than any kind of strategic consideration. The rescue operation took 3 hours, during which the human crew maintained a constant stream of grateful chatter, nervous jokes about their mechanical failures, and self-deprecating comments about human technological inadequacy. Captain Morrison seemed particularly fond of stories about previous mishaps, including an incident where they'd apparently gotten lost for 2 weeks because someone had installed their star charts upside down. "It wasn't until we tried to land on what we thought was Kepler Prime and discovered it was actually a gas giant that we realized something might be wrong," Morrison chuckled, accepting a syndicate emergency respirator with obvious relief. "Though in our defense, they look remarkably similar when viewed from the wrong angle." The medical team's examination revealed nothing more threatening than mild atmospheric deprivation and the kind of minor injuries typical of emergency repair work. The humans were precisely what they appeared to be: a cargo crew in over their heads, grateful for rescue, and cheerfully incompetent in the way that seemed characteristic of their species. It wasn't until the asterisk lucky strike exploded that Captain Zector realized he might have made a significant error in judgment. The detonation wasn't the spectacular fireworks display typical of fusion core failures or antimatter containment breaches. Instead, it was a precisely controlled burst that disabled the mandible's edge's asterisk sensor arrays, communication systems, and defensive screens in a sequence so perfectly timed that Zector's tactical computer couldn't even register what had happened until it was already complete. "Report," he chittered, his mandibles clicking with stress as emergency lighting bathed the bridge in combat-ready amber. "Sir, we've lost primary sensors, communications, and defensive capabilities," Lieutenant Vashka reported, her voice carrying the kind of professional calm that indicated she was suppressing panic through pure military discipline. "The explosion appears to have been some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon, but our scans showed no such technology aboard the human vessel." "What about the human crew?" "Unknown, sir. They were still in medical when the explosion occurred." Zector was about to order a full security alert when Captain Morrison's voice echoed through the ship's internal communication system. Her earlier wheeze had vanished, replaced by a tone of crisp professional competence that sent chills down Zector's chitinous spine. "Captain Zector, this is Colonel Sarah Morrison of Earth Strategic Operations. I apologize for the deception, but we needed to conduct a small field test of certain theoretical concepts. How are you accessing our communication systems?" Zector demanded, his translator rendering his chittering into galactic standard with mechanical precision. "Oh, that's simple enough," Sarah's voice replied, and Zector could hear the smile in her words. "Your medical team was very thorough in their examinations, Quite helpful, actually. We learned everything we needed to know about syndicate shipboard systems, crew deployment patterns, and tactical response protocols. On the main display, new contacts began appearing, ships materializing out of what had appeared to be empty space as their stealth systems deactivated. Human vessels, sleek and predatory, emerging from concealment with the coordinated precision of a hunting pack. "Impossible," Lieutenant Vashka whispered. "Our sensors would have detected them." "Your sensors were designed to detect ships using technologies you understand," Sarah's voice continued conversationally. "We've taken a somewhat different approach to stealth technology. Think of it as applied quantum uncertainty principles, with a dash of creative engineering." Zector's tactical display now showed 12 human vessels surrounding his patrol fleet, each one broadcasting targeting locks that shouldn't have been possible with primitive human technology. More troubling, the lock-on signatures indicated weapons systems that his computer couldn't even classify. "What do you want?" Zector asked, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the situation. "Nothing dramatic," Sarah assured him. "We'd simply like you to deliver a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them that humanity respectfully declines to accept the pacification protocols." "You cannot be serious. You're holding a syndicate patrol fleet hostage over a diplomatic disagreement." "Hostage is such an ugly word," Sarah replied. "We prefer to think of this as an enhanced negotiation session. Though I should mention that your communication systems are now fully operational again. Feel free to broadcast everything that's happening here back to Council headquarters." Zector realized with growing horror that the humans had never intended this to be a private encounter. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the entire Council to see what had happened to one of the galaxy's most feared military forces. "The Council will not tolerate this aggression," he warned. "Aggression?" Sarah sounded genuinely puzzled. "Captain, we haven't fired a single shot. We haven't damaged any of your vessels or harmed any of your crew. We've simply demonstrated that human technology might be slightly more advanced than previously estimated." "Slightly?" Vashka muttered, staring at sensor readings that indicated the human vessels were somehow occupying multiple dimensional positions simultaneously. "The funny thing about being underestimated," Sarah continued, "is that it gives you considerable advantages when people finally realize their error. For instance, did you know that the medical supplies we were supposedly transporting included detailed intelligence files on every major military installation in Council space?" Zector felt his exoskeleton grow cold. "Intelligence files?" "Oh yes. Turns out when you treat a species like harmless primitives, they tend to have remarkable access to your most sensitive facilities. Amazing how much classified information you can gather when everyone assumes you're too stupid to understand what you're looking at." The tactical display updated again, showing new data streams flowing from the human vessels. Fleet positions, defensive capabilities, supply line information, everything the Council had assumed was secure, now being broadcast openly across all frequencies. "This is madness," Zector clicked. "You're starting a war you cannot possibly win." "Are we starting a war?" Sarah asked, and her tone suggested genuine curiosity. "Because from our perspective, we're simply declining to accept terms we find unacceptable. If the Kepler Terminus system erupted into chaos, as 47 different species discovered that their carefully coordinated battle plans had somehow become 47 different disasters." Admiral Cross of the Zephyrian Mathematical Fleet watched in growing bewilderment as his precisely calculated formations dissolved into what could only be described as geometric poetry written in the language of tactical confusion. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, a being whose crystalline head processed battle data through quantum calculations that normally rendered him emotionally unflappable. "The Molten Core contingent has just engaged the aquatic collective support vessels. They appear to believe the collective fleet, is attempting to steal their attack vectors. That's impossible, Cross replied, his mathematical mind struggling to process information that refused to conform to logical patterns. Their targeting coordinates should be synchronized through the unified command matrix. About that matrix, sir. His communications officer interjected nervously. We're receiving conflicting orders from 17 different command authorities, each claiming to represent the Council's unified strategy. Through the chaos, Alina Vasquez watched from the command center of the human vessel Diplomatic Immunity a ship whose name had seemed like a joke until this moment. Sarah Mitchell stood beside her, no longer bothering to maintain the pretense of clumsiness as she coordinated what appeared to be the galaxy's most elaborate practical joke. "Status report," Alina requested, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "The Dominion Syndicate believes the Ethereal Collective is attempting to usurp their primary assault role," Sarah reported, consulting a tactical display that showed the battle developing exactly as their psychological warfare models had predicted. "The Ethereals think the Quantum Assembly is trying to phase shift their fleet out of real space. The Quantum Assembly is convinced that the crystalline hegemarchy is attempting to harmonically destabilize their dimensional anchors." Alina nodded with satisfaction. "And the actual human fleet?" "Currently enjoying refreshments at the Kepler Station Commissary," Sarah replied cheerfully. "I hear they have excellent coffee cake. Though technically, 3 of our ships are participating in the battle." "Participating how?" "Well, the uncertainty principle is broadcasting tactical analysis to all Council fleets simultaneously, but with slight variations in each transmission that make everyone think everyone else is lying to them. The Murphy's Law is providing what appears to be covering fire, but is actually just creating pretty light shows that confuse sensor readings. And the Occam's razor is flying in formations that look strategically significant but actually spell out increasingly rude limericks in 17 different languages." Alina allowed herself a small smile as she watched the most powerful military alliance in galactic history tear itself apart through the simple expedient of being given exactly what they thought they wanted. The Council had mobilized every available vessel to demonstrate overwhelming force against humanity's primitive rebellion. What they'd gotten instead was a comprehensive lesson in why assumptions about enemy capabilities could be tactically hazardous. "Incoming transmission from the Hegemarch," the communications officer announced. The massive crystalline being's image filled the command center's main display, his prismatic form flickering with colors that Alina had learned indicated extreme agitation. "Ambassador Vasquez, we demand you call off this madness immediately." "Your Eminence," Alina replied with perfect diplomatic courtesy, "I'm afraid you'll need to be more specific. Which particular aspect of the current situation concerns you?" "Your forces are somehow manipulating our fleet communications, disrupting our tactical coordination, and causing mass confusion throughout the assembled forces." Alina looked genuinely puzzled. "Our forces? But I thought the Council had determined that human military capabilities were negligible. Surely such a technologically inferior species couldn't possibly interfere with the sophisticated systems of 47 advanced civilizations." Sarah chose that moment to accidentally activate her personal entertainment system, which began playing what sounded like a jaunty military march composed entirely of kazoos and slide whistles. She fumbled with the controls in apparent mortification while the surreal music filled the command center. Sorry," she exclaimed, finally managing to silence the device. "I'm still learning to work these quantum-entangled entertainment matrices, though I have to say, the Ethereal Collective's taste in ceremonial music is unique." The Hegemarch's crystalline form shifted through several colors that Alina was fairly certain had never been seen in nature. "How did you acquire ethereal cultural databases?" "Cultural exchange programs are wonderful things," Alina said warmly. Amazing how much you can learn about a society through their art, literature, and most embarrassing musical traditions. From the tactical display, reports continued flooding in. The Molten Core fleet had accidentally melted 3 of their own support vessels while attempting to target human ships that turned out to be holographic projections. The Aquatic Collective was engaged in what their commanders insisted was strategic maneuvering, but looked suspiciously like synchronized swimming. 2 different species were having a heated argument about whose turn it was to use the gravitational slingshot around Kepler's primary star. "This is chaos," the hegemarch intoned, his harmonic frequencies carrying overtones of profound frustration. "It's certainly not the orderly demonstration of overwhelming force that was planned," Alina agreed sympathetically. "Though I have to say, it's quite educational from an anthropological perspective. Fascinating to see how different species respond to unexpected variables." Lyralay's voice cut through the communications channel, her musical tones carrying an edge Alina had never heard before. "Alina, this has gone far enough. People are going to start dying if this continues." "Are they?" Alina asked, and for the first time her diplomatic mask slipped slightly, revealing something harder underneath. "Because from where I'm standing, the only casualties so far have been pride and assumptions about galactic military supremacy." "You're manipulating the entire Council fleet through psychological warfare," Lyralay accused. "Are we?" Sarah interjected, managing to sound genuinely hurt. "That seems like a rather harsh interpretation of what is essentially enhanced diplomatic discourse." Alina's expression softened as she looked at Lyralay's image on the display. "You were right to be suspicious about us. Humans have been studying Council psychology, technology, and tactical doctrine for much longer than anyone realized. But you were wrong about our intentions." "Then what do you want?" the hegemarch demanded. "Partnership," Alina said simply. "Not junior partnership, not guided membership, not a place at the children's table of galactic civilization. Actual partnership between equals." The tactical display showed the Council fleets beginning to realize the scope of their coordination failures. Several species were actively withdrawing from the engagement rather than risk further friendly fire incidents. Others were attempting to contact human vessels directly to arrange local ceasefires. Equals. The hegemarch's harmonics carried what might have been laughter or disbelief. "You are one species. We are 47 civilizations, with thousands of years of combined experience." "Experience doing what?" Alina asked, her tone remaining conversational, maintaining the status quo. "Ensuring that nothing changes, nothing challenges established patterns, nothing forces anyone to question whether the current system is actually optimal." Sarah had found another gadget to fiddle with, producing a series of harmless but attention-getting sparks as she apparently struggled with alien technology. "It's funny," she mused, ducking as her latest experiment created what looked like a miniature aurora in the command center's air recycling system. "How experience can sometimes become just another word for the inability to adapt to new circumstances." Lyralay's image flickered as she moved closer to her transmission pickup. "Alina, what you're proposing would destabilize everything. The Council system has maintained peace for millennia." "Has it?" Alina asked gently. "Or has it maintained stagnation? Peace through suppression of change isn't really peace. It's just delayed conflict." The communications channel expanded as other Council members joined the conversation. Councillor Vexthal's chittering came through with mechanical precision. "You cannot seriously expect the established powers to simply accept your demands because you've demonstrated superior tactical capabilities." "Actually," Alina replied, "that's exactly how most of your species achieved their current positions in the first place. The difference is that you did it over centuries or millennia. We're simply operating on a compressed timeline." Sarah had given up on her latest technological experiment and was now reviewing battle reports with undisguised glee. "Oh, this is rich," she announced. The Quantum Assembly just filed a formal complaint against the Ethereal Collective for aggressive pacifism. Apparently, their attempts at peaceful resolution are being interpreted as psychological warfare. Alina sighed theatrically. This is what happens when you assume that everyone else thinks like you do. 47 different species, each interpreting the actions of 46 others through the lens of their own cultural assumptions. And how do humans interpret this situation? Lyreley asked, her ears flat against her head in what Alina had learned indicated either fear or resignation. As an opportunity, Alina said, her diplomatic smile returning. The Council has two choices. You can continue this battle until your fleets destroy each other through miscommunication and mutual suspicion, proving that the current system is fundamentally unstable when faced with unexpected challenges. Or you can acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, a fresh perspective might be valuable. The tactical display showed the first major withdrawal, as the crystalline hegemarchy's fleet began pulling back from the engagement zone. Within minutes, other species began following suit as commanders realized that continuing the battle posed more risks than retreat. You're offering to end this if we grant you full council membership, the hegemarch asked. I'm offering to help you build something better than what you have, Alina corrected. The council system works when everyone agrees to follow the same rules and never challenge fundamental assumptions. But what happens when you encounter a species that doesn't fit those parameters, or when circumstances change in ways your established procedures can't handle? Sarah had managed to create what appeared to be a small holographic planetarium in the middle of the command center, complete with tiny ships engaged in an elaborate dance around miniature stars. The universe is a big place, she observed, poking at one of the holographic vessels and causing it to spin dramatically. Seems short-sighted to assume that human-level chaos is the worst surprise you're ever going to encounter. Lyreley's image flickered again as she seemed to make some internal decision. Alina, if the Council agrees to renegotiate humanity's status, what guarantee do we have that you won't use these same tactics against us in the future? Alina's expression became genuinely warm as she looked at the Etherny mediator. Lyreley, you've spent the last several days watching humans operate. Have we lied to you? Have we broken any promises? Have we acted with anything other than complete honesty about our capabilities and intentions? You deceived us about your technological advancement, Vexthal interjected. Did we? Sarah asked, consulting her holographic display. I seem to remember Alina specifically mentioning that humans have a talent for exceeding expectations in directions no one anticipates. That seems pretty straightforward to me. The hegemarch's crystal